Hyunwoo Kim pushed his thick glasses up his nose and stared out his small apartment window. The floating moving pods looked like giant soap bubbles drifting through the air, except these bubbles carried furniture and boxes instead of dreams. He lived on the 15th floor of the Harmony Heights complex, one of those fancy mixed-species buildings where humans and aliens tried to be good neighbors. Being a xenobiology student meant Hyunwoo spent most of his time buried in textbooks about alien life forms, but he had never actually lived next to any. The apartment next to his had been empty for 3 months, and honestly, he liked the quiet. He could study late into the night without worrying about disturbing anyone or being disturbed. That was about to change. The moving pods stopped right outside his window, hovering near the balcony next door. Hyunwoo watched with growing curiosity as the pods opened like flower petals. What came out made him drop his coffee mug. 2 beings stepped onto the balcony, and they looked like they were made of living crystal. Their skin was translucent and blue, like looking through colored glass. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, with long limbs that moved in a graceful, flowing way. When sunlight hit them, little rainbows danced across their bodies. Hyunwoo had read about Zephyrians in his textbooks, but seeing them in person was completely different. They moved like dancers, every gesture smooth and deliberate. Their faces were humanoid but angular, with large eyes that seemed to hold tiny stars. A soft knock at his door interrupted his staring. When he opened it, the 2 crystalline beings stood in his hallway, looking somewhat awkward in the narrow human-sized space. "Greetings, neighbor," said the taller one. Her voice was unlike anything Hyunwoo had ever heard. It wasn't just words. It was like listening to a song and speech at the same time. The sound made his teeth tingle and his ears ring slightly, but not unpleasantly. "I am Jira, and this is my mate, Mello." Mello nodded, his voice creating the same harmonic effect. "We are pleased to make your acquaintance." Hyunwoo tried not to stare, but it was impossible. Up close, he could see that their skin wasn't just blue. It had layers like looking into deep water. Patterns of light moved under their surface, pulsing gently like a slow heartbeat. "I'm Hyunwoo," he managed to say. "Welcome to the building." Jira's large eyes seemed to brighten. "We have heard much about human kindness. We work as atmospheric engineers for the terraforming project on Luna 7. The pay allows us to afford accommodation in this pleasant district." "That sounds fascinating," Hyunwoo said, and he meant it. Luna 7 was one of the moon colonies being transformed to support multiple species. "Are you planning to stay long?" Mello and Jira exchanged a look that somehow involved their skin flickering in synchronized patterns. It was clearly some form of communication, but Hyunwoo couldn't begin to guess what they were saying to each other. "We hope to remain for several cycles," Jira said finally. "There is one matter we should discuss as good neighbors do." She paused, and her skin seemed to dim slightly. "Our reproductive cycle approaches. This is a natural process for our kind, but we understand it may cause some inconvenience to nearby residents." Hyunwoo nodded politely, though he had no idea what she meant. His mind was already drifting back to his thesis project on interspecies communication patterns. The deadline was next week, and he still had 2 chapters to finish. "Of course, no problem at all," he said automatically. "If you need anything, just let me know. I'm usually home in the evenings." Both Zephyrians seemed to relax at his response. Their skin brightened again, and Mello made a sound that might have been relief. "You are most gracious," Jira said. "We shall endeavor to minimize any disturbance." After they left, Hyunwoo returned to his desk and his pile of research papers. He made a mental note to look up more information about Zephyrian culture when he had time. It would be good to understand his new neighbors better. That evening, as he settled down to work on his thesis, a soft sound began filtering through the walls. It was barely noticeable at first, just a low humming like someone running a washing machine in the distance. Hyunwoo figured it was probably some alien household appliance and went back to his writing. But as the night wore on, the humming continued, never stopping, never changing pitch. It wasn't loud enough to be truly annoying, but it was persistent, like having a mosquito buzzing somewhere in your room that you can't quite locate. By midnight, the sound had become part of the background noise, and Hyunwoo had almost forgotten about it. He was deep in his research, trying to make sense of complex communication theories, when his computer screen flickered. Just once. So briefly, he might have imagined it. By the third morning, Hyunwoo woke up to his alarm clock displaying the wrong time. The digital numbers kept shifting between 7:30 and 8:15, flickering back and forth like they couldn't make up their mind. His phone was doing the same thing, and his laptop had crashed twice during the night. The humming from next door had changed completely. What started as a simple, monotone buzz had transformed into something that sounded almost like music. Multiple tones wove together in patterns that seemed to follow some kind of rhythm, rising and falling in waves. It was actually quite beautiful, if you ignored the fact that it was making every electronic device in his apartment go crazy. Hyunwoo stumbled to his kitchen to make coffee, but his microwave display was flashing random numbers. His refrigerator was beeping error codes he'd never heard before. Even his electric toothbrush was spinning at weird speeds. A sharp knock at his door interrupted his confusion. He opened it to find Mrs. Park from across the hall, and she looked angry. Mrs. Park was in her 70s, a retired teacher who had lived in the building longer than anyone else. She usually kept to herself, but today her face was flushed with frustration. "Young man," she said, pointing toward the Zephyrian apartment, "something needs to be done about those new neighbors of yours." "What's wrong, Mrs. Park?" She pressed her hand to her chest where Hyunwoo knew she had a pacemaker. "My medical devices are going haywire. My blood pressure monitor gave me 3 different readings in 5 minutes. My hearing aid keeps switching channels on its own. This morning my pacemaker started beeping like a smoke detector." Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. If the sounds from next door were affecting medical equipment, this was serious. Mrs. Park wasn't the only elderly resident in the building, and many of them relied on electronic medical devices to stay healthy. "I'll look into it right away," he promised. After Mrs. Park left, Hyunwoo abandoned his thesis work and dove into research about Zephyrian biology. What he found in the university database made his stomach drop. Zephyrian reproduction wasn't like human reproduction at all. They didn't just mate. They created something called harmonic resonance fields. During their reproductive cycle, both partners generated specific sound frequencies that synchronized their biological processes. These frequencies could travel through solid matter and affect anything with electrical components within a significant radius. But that wasn't the worst part. The research papers mentioned that these same frequencies could interfere with neural activity in other species. The sounds could actually affect brain function, causing anything from mild confusion to severe neurological problems. Hyunwoo grabbed more research papers, reading faster than he ever had in his life. The harmonic frequencies weren't constant. They increased in intensity and complexity as the reproductive cycle progressed. What started as simple tones would eventually become a complex symphony of sounds that could be heard for miles. In their natural habitat on the Zephyrian homeworld, this wasn't a problem. They lived in crystal caverns that naturally contained and channeled these frequencies. But in human buildings made of concrete and steel, there was nothing to stop the sounds from spreading. His laptop screen flickered again, this time staying dark for several seconds before coming back to life. The humming from next door seemed to pulse like a heartbeat made of sound. Hyunwoo knew he had to talk to his neighbors immediately. He knocked on their door, his heart pounding. When Mello answered, Hyunwoo could see that something was different about the Zephyrian's appearance. His crystalline skin was flickering with rapid patterns of light, like a computer screen processing too much information. His large eyes seemed clouded and his movements were more jerky than the graceful flow Hyunwoo had seen before. "Mello, I need to talk to you about the sounds," Hyunwoo said quickly. "They're affecting the other residents' medical equipment." Mello's skin patterns shifted to what looked like embarrassment. The lights dimmed and moved more slowly across his surface. "We are experiencing difficulties," he admitted. His harmonic voice sounded strained, like he was trying to keep it under control. "We struggle with your building's acoustics. Our kind requires specific resonance chambers for reproduction. These walls, they do not contain our frequencies as they should." Is there anything you can do to reduce the intensity? We cannot stop the process once it has begun, Mello said, and his skin flickered with what might have been distress. To interrupt our cycle now would mean death for both Jira and myself, and for our offspring, but we did not realize the harm it would cause others. As if to emphasize his point, Hyunwoo's phone started buzzing uncontrollably in his pocket, the vibration motor stuck on maximum power. How long will this last? Hyunwoo asked. Before Mello could answer, every light in the hallway suddenly blazed brighter than normal, then dimmed to almost nothing. The building's electrical system was groaning under the stress of the harmonic interference. Then, with a sound like a giant circuit breaker tripping, half the building plunged into darkness. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in an eerie red glow. Somewhere in the distance, Hyunwoo could hear elevator alarms going off, and the sound of confused voices as residents tried to figure out what had happened. Mello's crystalline features were now pulsing with rapid, panicked light patterns. "This is worse than we feared," he said, his voice creating discordant harmonies that made Hyunwoo's ears ring. "The resonance is growing stronger. We cannot control it." The siren started wailing at 5 in the morning. Hyunwoo jolted awake, to flashing red and blue lights streaming through his windows. He stumbled to look outside and saw the street filled with emergency vehicles, ambulances, fire trucks, and several white vans with symbols he didn't recognize. His apartment was shaking, not violently, but with a steady vibration that made his teeth chatter and his books rattle on their shelves. The humming from next door had become something else entirely, a deep, thrumming pulse that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It felt like being inside a giant speaker. A loud knock pounded on his door, followed by an authoritative voice shouting, "Building evacuation! Everyone out now!" Hyunwoo grabbed his jacket and stumbled into the hallway. Emergency workers in white, hazmat suits were going door to door, helping confused residents evacuate. The elderly Mrs. Park was being carried on a stretcher, her eyes rolled back and her body twitching slightly. "What's happening to her?" Hyunwoo asked one of the medics. "Neurological interference," the medic replied grimly. "The sound frequencies are affecting brain function. We've got 12 people showing symptoms already." Outside, the scene looked like something from a disaster movie. Yellow tape surrounded the entire building, and workers in protective gear were setting up monitoring equipment. Residents stood in clusters on the sidewalk, wrapped in blankets and looking bewildered. Some were holding their heads, complaining of severe headaches. Others seemed disoriented, like they couldn't focus on anything. Hyunwoo spotted Jira and Mello near one of the white vans. They were inside some kind of containment unit, a transparent box that looked like it was designed to hold dangerous materials rather than living beings. Both Zephyrians were in obvious distress. Their crystalline skin was pulsing with chaotic light patterns, and even through the containment walls, Hyunwoo could see they were in pain. Dr. Song, the head of the city's interspecies medical center, was arguing with someone over a radio. Hyunwoo had seen her on the news before. She was one of the leading experts on alien biology and medical care. She looked exhausted and frustrated. "The resonance is increasing every hour," she was saying into her radio. "We're measuring frequencies that could cause permanent brain damage in humans. We need to separate them immediately." Hyunwoo pushed through the crowd of onlookers and emergency workers until he reached the containment unit. Jira saw him approaching and pressed her hands against the transparent wall. Her voice came through a speaker system, but it sounded distorted and weak. "Hyunwoo," she said, her harmonic tones barely recognizable. "We are so sorry. We never intended for this to happen." Mello was curled in the corner of the containment unit, his light patterns dim and erratic. "The separation will kill us," he managed to say. "Our bonding process cannot be interrupted once begun. We will die, and our offspring will die with us." Dr. Song approached the containment unit, her face grim. "I'm sorry, but we have no choice. The frequencies you're generating are causing seizures in humans within 50 meters. 3 people are already in critical condition at the hospital. We have to move you to separate facilities immediately." "Please," Jira begged, her skin flickering with desperate patterns. "There must be another way. In our world, the crystal caverns contain our resonance. Here in your metal and concrete buildings, the sounds spread without control. I understand your biology, Dr. Song said, though her voice was gentle. But I have a responsibility to protect human lives. The separation procedure will begin in 1 hour. Hyunwoo felt something click in his mind. All those hours studying xenobiology, all those research papers about interspecies adaptation, suddenly pieces were falling into place. Wait, he said, stepping forward. Dr. Song, give me 48 hours. I think I know how to fix this. Dr. Song turned to look at him, her eyebrows raised. And you are? Hyunwoo Kim. I'm a xenobiology student at Seoul National University. I live next door to them. He pointed at the containment unit. I've been researching Zephyrian reproductive biology for the past 3 days. Young man, this isn't a time for student projects, Dr. Song said impatiently. People's lives are at stake. That's exactly why you should listen to me, Hyunwoo insisted. Jira mentioned crystal caverns. On their homeworld, Zephyrians reproduce in natural resonance chambers that contain and focus their harmonic frequencies. We need to recreate those conditions artificially. Dr. Song frowned. That's theoretically possible, but the engineering challenges would be enormous. We'd need specialized acoustic dampening systems, resonance chambers, harmonic frequency modulators. I know people who can help, Hyunwoo said quickly. Engineering students, architecture majors, even some professors who specialize in acoustic design. The university has resources we could use. Around them, more ambulances were arriving. The building was still vibrating, and several windows had cracked from the harmonic stress. In the distance, Hyunwoo could hear car alarms going off as the frequency spread through the neighborhood. 48 hours, he repeated. If I can't solve this by then, go ahead with the separation, but at least give us a chance to try. Dr. Song looked at the containment unit, where Jira and Mello were holding each other. Their light patterns synchronized in what was clearly a desperate attempt to maintain their connection. The frequencies are getting stronger, she said. Every hour we delay increases the risk to human lives. Then we work fast, Hyunwoo said. But if we can solve this, we'll save both species, and we'll learn something that could help with future interspecies cohabitation. Dr. Song was quiet for a long moment, listening to reports coming through her radio. 3 more residents had been taken to the hospital with neurological symptoms. The resonance was affecting people in the buildings next door now too. 48 hours, she said finally. But if there's any indication that the situation is getting worse, we separate them immediately. I won't risk a catastrophic neurological event. Hyunwoo nodded, his heart pounding. He had 2 days to solve a problem that involved physics, biology, engineering, and alien reproduction, all while people's lives hung in the balance. Behind him, the building continued to vibrate with otherworldly harmonies, and somewhere inside, that sound was either salvation or disaster. Hyunwoo didn't sleep that first night. He sat in the university library with his laptop, surrounded by stacks of books about acoustics, engineering, and alien biology. His eyes burned from staring at research papers, but he couldn't stop. Every hour that passed meant Jira and Mello were getting closer to death, and more humans were at risk from the dangerous frequencies. At 3 in the morning, his phone buzzed with a text from his friend Dae-hyun, an engineering student he'd known since freshman year. Saw the news about the alien crisis. You're involved, right? Need help? Hyunwoo called him immediately. Can you meet me at the library? I need someone who understands sound engineering. Dae-hyun arrived 30 minutes later with coffee and a toolbox. He was the kind of person who could fix anything, from broken computers to motorcycle engines. If anyone could help solve this problem, it was him. Show me what we're dealing with, Dae-hyun said, settling into a chair beside Hyunwoo. They spent the next 2 hours going through everything Hyunwoo had learned about Zephyrian biology. Dae-hyun asked detailed questions about frequency ranges, harmonic patterns, and resonance effects. He made notes and sketches, his engineering mind already working on solutions. This is like trying to contain a radio signal that can pass through walls, Dae-hyun said finally. But instead of radio waves, it's sound waves that can mess with people's brains. And we need to contain it without stopping it completely, Hyunwoo added. If we interrupt their reproductive cycle, they die. At dawn, they called Minseo, an architecture student who specialized in acoustic design. She was working on her thesis about concert hall acoustics and knew more about sound containment than anyone else they could think of. Min Seo met them at the engineering building, where they had access to better computers and design software. She listened to their explanation while sketching rapid diagrams on a whiteboard. On the Zephyrian homeworld, they reproduce in crystal caverns, she said, drawing cave-like structures. These caverns work like natural resonance chambers. The crystal walls absorb certain frequencies and amplify others, creating a controlled, acoustic environment. So we need to build an artificial crystal cavern, Daehyun said. Exactly, but instead of crystal, we use engineered materials. Min Seo's pencil flew across the paper, creating detailed designs, harmonic dampeners to absorb the dangerous frequencies, resonance chambers to focus the necessary ones, and containment walls to prevent sound leakage. The design that emerged was complex but elegant. They would build a specialized chamber using acoustic foam, metal resonators, and electronic frequency modulators. The chamber would contain Jira and Mello's reproductive frequencies while protecting everyone outside. But building it would require resources they didn't have. At 10 that morning, they presented their plan to Dr. Song at the emergency command center that had been set up near the evacuated building. She studied their designs with growing interest. This could actually work, she admitted, but the materials alone would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you're talking about building this in less than 2 days. What's the alternative? Hyun-woo asked. If we separate them, they die. If we don't, more people get hurt. Dr. Song made some phone calls, but the answers weren't encouraging. The city government was reluctant to spend enormous amounts of money on an untested solution proposed by college students. The mayor's office suggested it would be safer and cheaper to simply relocate the Zephyrians to a remote area. They don't understand, Min Seo said in frustration. This isn't just about Jira and Mello. If we solve this problem, we create a template for future interspecies housing. This could help thousands of aliens who want to live among humans. By afternoon, they had hit bureaucratic walls everywhere they turned. The university couldn't authorize the expense without approval from the Board of Trustees. The city council wanted environmental impact studies. The federal government said it was a local issue. Meanwhile, reports were coming in that the resonance effects were spreading. People in a 3-block radius were experiencing headaches, dizziness, and concentration problems. Several more residents had been hospitalized with seizure-like symptoms. Hyun-woo stood outside the command center, watching workers monitor the contained but deteriorating Zephyrians. Jira and Mello were barely conscious now, their light patterns weak and irregular. They had maybe 18 hours left before the separation would become unavoidable. That's when he decided to make a public appeal. Using his phone, he recorded a video message and posted it on every social media platform he could think of. He explained the situation simply. 2 aliens were dying because humans couldn't figure out how to help them safely reproduce. He talked about what this crisis meant for the future of interspecies cooperation. These beings trusted us with their lives, he said into the camera. They chose to live among us, to work alongside us, to be our neighbors. If we can't protect residents of our own city, regardless of what species they are, what does that say about humanity? The video went viral. Within hours, news stations picked up the story. Social media exploded with discussions about alien rights, human responsibility, and interspecies cooperation. More importantly, donations started pouring in. Small amounts from individual people, larger contributions from businesses, and finally, a massive donation from a tech company that specialized in acoustic engineering. By evening, they had the funding they needed. Dr. Song found Hyun-woo in the university workshop, where he and his friends were already beginning to assemble the first components of their resonance chamber. The mayor's office just called, she said with a tired smile. You have official authorization to proceed. The materials you need are being delivered tonight. Hyun-woo looked at his friends. Daehyun covered in metal shavings, Min Seo surrounded by blueprints, both of them exhausted but determined. We can do this, he said. We have to. Outside, the sun was setting over a city where humans and aliens were learning, sometimes painfully, how to live together. And in a workshop filled with half-built acoustic equipment, 3 college students were about to attempt something that had never been tried before. The clock was ticking, but for the first time in days, Hyunwoo felt hopeful. The resonance chamber was finished with 3 hours to spare. Hyunwoo stood back and looked at what they had built, hardly believing it was real. The structure looked like something between a recording studio and a spaceship. Curved walls covered in specialized acoustic foam, banks of electronic equipment humming quietly, and a transparent observation window that allowed them to monitor what happened inside. Dae-hyun was running final tests on the frequency modulators, making tiny adjustments with a screwdriver. Min-seo was checking the structural integrity of the containment walls for the 100th time. None of them had slept in 36 hours, but adrenaline kept them going. "All systems are showing green," Dae-hyun announced, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "The harmonic dampeners are calibrated to absorb the dangerous frequencies while allowing the reproductive harmonics to pass through." Dr. Song arrived with a team of medical specialists and the containment unit holding Jira and Mello. The 2 Zephyrians looked terrible. Their crystalline skin was dim and flickering weakly, like dying light bulbs. They could barely stand without supporting each other. "This is our last chance," Dr. Song said quietly to Hyunwoo. "If this doesn't work, we'll have to separate them within the hour." Moving Jira and Mello into the resonance chamber was nerve-wracking. The moment they crossed the threshold, their skin began to brighten slightly. The chamber's acoustics immediately began working, containing their frequencies while allowing their biological processes to continue. "How do you feel?" Hyunwoo asked through the intercom system. "Better," Jira replied, her harmonic voice clearer than it had been in days. "The resonance feels correct, like home." Over the next 12 hours, they watched through the observation window as the Zephyrian reproductive cycle reached its climax. The light patterns under Jira and Mello's skin became incredibly complex, synchronized in ways that looked almost like a conversation made of pure light. The sounds they produced were beautiful, haunting melodies that the chamber contained safely, while allowing the necessary biological functions to proceed. Hyunwoo took shifts with the other monitoring team members, but he couldn't stay away for long. This was the culmination of everything he had studied, everything he believed about interspecies cooperation and understanding. At dawn on the 3rd day, something miraculous happened. 3 small figures emerged from what looked like crystalline cocoons that had formed around Jira and Mello during the night. The offspring were tiny versions of their parents, no bigger than human children, with the same translucent blue skin and gentle light patterns. "They're beautiful," Min-seo whispered, watching through the observation window. The baby Zephyrians moved with the same graceful flow as their parents, but their light patterns were simpler, more playful. They seemed curious about everything, touching the walls of the chamber and creating tiny harmonic sounds that were like musical laughter. Dr. Song ran comprehensive medical scans on all 5 Zephyrians. "Perfect health across the board," she announced with obvious relief. The reproductive cycle completed successfully, and there are no signs of stress or complications. The resonance chamber had worked flawlessly. Not a single dangerous frequency had escaped to affect the humans outside. The crisis was over. In the weeks that followed, Hyunwoo found himself at the center of a media storm. News outlets from around the world wanted to interview the college student who had solved an interspecies crisis. Scientists and engineers studied his resonance chamber design, improving and refining it for future use. The Korean Xenological Institute offered him a full research position before he even graduated. "Your work here will become the foundation for new interspecies housing protocols," the director told him. "You've potentially saved thousands of lives and made it possible for more alien species to safely integrate into human communities." But the real reward came 6 months later. Hyunwoo had moved back into his apartment in Harmony Heights, which had been thoroughly renovated with new acoustic dampening systems. The building was now a model for mixed-species housing, with residents from 4 different alien species living alongside humans. On a sunny afternoon, he was sitting on his balcony working on his doctoral thesis when he heard familiar sounds from the courtyard below. Looking down, He saw Jira and Mello's 3 children playing with human kids from the building. The young Zephyrians had learned to modulate their harmonic voices so they could communicate with human children. They wore small devices that translated their light patterns into words, and their human friends had learned to recognize basic Zephyrian emotions by watching the colors that flowed under their skin. "Tag, you're it!" shouted a human boy running across the playground. One of the young Zephyrians chased after him, their skin flickering with patterns that clearly indicated joy and excitement. Jira appeared on the balcony next to Hyunwoo's. She was wearing a small device around her neck, a personal harmonic dampener that allowed her to speak without creating dangerous frequencies. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying gentle musical tones that were now safely contained. "For everything you did for our family." Hyunwoo watched the children playing below, human and alien kids learning from each other, sharing games and laughter despite their biological differences. "Humans show remarkable adaptability," Jira continued. "Your species has a gift for solving problems that seem impossible." "We're good at learning," Hyunwoo replied, thinking about everything that had happened, especially when lives depend on it. As the sun set over New Seoul's mixed species district, the sound of children's laughter filled the air, some purely human, some harmonic and musical, all blending together into something beautiful and new. It was the sound of different species learning to live together, to understand each other, and to build a future where being different didn't mean being alone. Hyunwoo smiled and returned to his thesis, which was now focused on developing better integration protocols for interspecies communities. Outside his window, the future was taking shape one friendship at a time.